All right, everybody, welcome back to Gridiron Gang, a Detroit News Lions podcast. Today is Thursday, March 26, 2026, and today's episode, we're going to be talking about comments made by Lions GM Brad Holmes and an excellent 45-minute interview done with the Lions Collective, go over our mock draft 3.0, and then go position by position to determine which spots the Lions have gotten better at, which spot the Lions have gotten worse at. Before we get to all that, I'm Nolan and Bianchi. With me, as always, my partner in crime, Richard Silva. Richard, how are we doing today? Nice little Wednesday. Weather's starting to turn up a little bit. Starting to feel like spring. I got a new setup here. I'm sitting next to a window. I feel great. I feel very energized for this episode.
Yeah, no, apart from the fact that it snowed, like, briefly, flurried for, like, two days ago.
Sure.
But other than that, I am feeling good. It's almost draft month, which means, like you said, it's almost, well, it is the first day of spring has already come, technically, right? It is. We are in spring now,
yes.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So, yeah. I was going to say.
The Red Wings have collapsed, which is a good sign. It's spring.
It's spring, yeah.
What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say that draft month signals spring in my brain.
Yes. Well, and it's the start of baseball. Baseball starts tonight, the night we're recording this. By the time you're listening to this, the Tigers will be playing tonight in San Diego. So that's very exciting as well. I'm starting to get like spring fever. You know, I went to the Red Wings game last night. They lost, which
tough.
Pretty much, you know, it was a tough loss. But I just got really excited for like baseball, so I've been like sniping baseball tickets here and there. So I've got like 3 games I'm already going to go to. So I'm excited, and that obviously comes with the draft as well. The draft is always like, I know you and I were talking yesterday, just probably my favorite, like round 1 of the draft is probably one of my favorite work nights of the year. It's just so fun. Like we're all just kind of like sitting in the room, huddled together, the entire beat, just kind of reacting to what's happening. It's a little different for the Lions this year because they're at 17. So, you know, you can't stray like too far from what's going on related to the Lions. Cause in 2 years past, it's been, you know, 28th and 29th. So we've had some time before the Lions had to pick, and we could kind of just relax. But, you know, who knows what'll happen this year.
Even day 2 and day 3 is a good time because Ben Raven is getting excited at every Big Ten tight end that gets taken. He's like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Day 2. Well, day 2 is fun. And then day 3 just becomes hell. Like you're like, oh my gosh, like all just one after another. You can't even wrap your thoughts around anything. That's when most of the picks happen. Like, I think we forget that. Like, I think most of the excitement is on Thursday, but then by Saturday, that's when like the brunt of the work is being done. So anyways, we're going to talk about the draft later on in this episode. Like I said, we're going to go over mock draft 3.0. And then I believe Richard's keep 4 cut 4 is draft team. So we'll see what happens there. We do want to start though with Brad Holmes because he did an excellent 45-minute interview, but with the Lions Collective yesterday. They did a great job with that. And we have learned some things about Brad Holmes and the Lions and their approach to free agency. Namely, I think the one that I want to start with here, because we are going to hit on quite a few different things, and you can go check that interview out on YouTube, I believe on like Spotify or wherever you get podcasts. So go check it out in full. But the big thing that stuck out to me was the Lions have signed 15 free agents as of Wednesday mid-afternoon, the day we're recording this. Only one of them has term longer than a year. So the Lions have basically made 14 one-year free agent signings, bargain bin signings, as they're sometimes referred to. And when asked about that, Brad Holmes kind of said, look, we have quote unquote financial constraints, end quote, that are preventing us from going out and adding more players. He said, quote, when you're looking at the constraints that we have financially entering in, it's like, okay, we're not going to be able to do a lot of multi-year deals because that's what we're trying to do with these extensions that we have. Because what we're trying to do with these extensions that we have upcoming, the implications that it would have on our cap would be, I don't want to call it crippling, but it would have been hard to overcome. We were kind of limited in how many multi-year deals we could actually get. So the Lions end up, I think if you were going to make one multi-year deal, you got it at the position that you wanted at. Like, I think you can make an argument for edge rusher or tackle, but I think just given the difficulty of finding a really quality center, like how many, I know we talked about this on the podcast, how many of these guys have actually made it to market that we thought were going to be available? By the time free agency began, there was like 3 like comfortably upgrading like starting centers out there. So
sure.
I think they probably attacked it in the right way. If we are to believe that they were really under these constraints, which a lot of Lions fans do not believe. So we'll talk about that in a second. But
I think what it comes down to is because I think you could quibble with like some of the extensions that have been given out. Like I think, especially coming off last season, like people will get upset about the amount of money that Aleem McNeil is on the books for, or Kirby Joseph with the knee now. I think majority of the extensions that have been handed out have been like market value, and you don't want to let that guy out of the building. Panay, obviously, St. Brown, the contract looks better every year that passes. I think the JMO deal, I think was fair market value for what he provides.
The JMO deal has potential to be his best. Like,
sure. Yeah. I mentioned Panay at the top. I think Jared, that's just the going rate for a quarterback. Like, I think the Hutch, obviously, you didn't want to let that guy out of the building. So, and the 23 class, the big four from that, assuming health for Laporta and Branch, assuming health there, pretty much, I think majority of fans and people in that building would want all four of those guys back. But I think where the hang up is that, to keep all of those guys, the Lions could have, in theory, restructured more contracts to create more money, like right now in the present day, and been able to maybe make a little bit more noise in free agency. But it would have been at the expense of, future money and future extensions. So I think that's kind of where the hang up is, that people understand like the extensions that they've given out already like do hamstring them a little bit, but they also see like you could have restructured some money and moved some things around to make these guys, to make some other free agents fit. But again, that comes at the expense of Jack Campbell or Jahmyr Gibbs or Brian Branch or Sam Laporta. And if that's a decision you're comfortable making as a fan, like fine, like that's an opinion that you have. Brad clearly does not have that opinion. He wants to keep those guys.
Yeah, I saw like one tweet specifically of guy being like, you think it's a good idea to re-sign Campbell and Gibbs? And it's like, yes, they're excellent players. And but I agree with you. And I think it's tough though, because to your point, I think the only two contracts that he's given out that you can really, well, three. I still think the Derek Barnes one was an overpay at the time. They bid against themselves. But Aleem and Kirby, like, that's a matter of hindsight. Aleem was well on his way to being that guy that you paid him to be. And Kirby leads the NFL in interceptions over the entire time, or led the NFL in interceptions over the entire time that he'd been in the league when he received his payday, which that's not like leading the league in like tackles or something like that. Like, interceptions literally changed the game. It's arguably the most important. I would say it's the most important like defensive stat that you can have if it is replicatable, which in his case, I believe that it was.
Also, a lot of Kirby's contract was not fully guaranteed at signing. Yes. So if in the event this knee issue is career altering, which, like, knock on wood, praying it's not. If it is, the Lions can very, very, not very easily, you will eat dead money, but you can move off of the contract.
Yes. And so then we get back to, well, the only truly bad contracts might potentially be Derek Barnes and Aleem McNeil. I still am not convinced that Aleem McNeil is a bad contract. I am withholding judgment until we see him on the field this season. And Barnes, I mean, we've talked about that. I don't even know if, like, he had a little bit of a down year last year, but again, coming off a serious knee injury, could he be a better player in this upcoming year? And I thought that the only problem with that for me was, A, it probably cost them any chances of bringing back Alex Anzalone, and B, you did it after he was coming off of a career-altering or, serious injury, and probably bidding against yourself. You signed him before he went to free agency. So that was to this day, of all the players that he signed, and he's made a lot of signings, I think those are the only ones that you can point to and be like, wow, that was bad.
Yeah. I think maybe you could also take issue with the David Montgomery extension, but I think at this point they more than made up for it. Like, they traded him and got back good value. Like, it's kind of like wipe your hands like that. If you think that was a mistake, I think that mistake has been resolved at this point.
Which, thank you for bringing that up. I did not like that at the time. I continued to be confused about it as they diminished his role in the last season. I still think that his diminished role was largely a result of just the types of games that they were playing in, where they almost never had a lead, never had an ability to let him be the tone setter or whatever you want to call him. But I agree with you that was another point that I took issue with at the time. It just didn't make sense. Like you signed him like 2 years early. So yeah, very strange. But
if I could add one more thing on like, because we're going to touch on some other things from the interview, but in terms of like the big picture, like free agency, that Brad explaining what happened, I think Brad has justifiably been criticized as of late. For example, I think, just a couple off the top of my head, like the Tesla trade. I think everyone is in agreement, like Tesla can be a really good player, but trading what amounts to spending what amounts to 3 third-round picks on a guy that, like, when you have St. Brown, JMO, Gibbs, Laporta, it's, he's at best going to be like the 4th or 5th option, like as a pass catcher. So like if you want to get upset at that move, like I agree with you. Like I think this is a good player, maybe not the best like spending of resources in that one, or the edge position, which is
and real quick about the Tesla thing, because I think a counter argument to that is, well, if you don't think there are any good players in that range, then like, yeah, might as well just give up your 3rd round picks and just go get the player that you know is good. However, the draft is not the only place to acquire players.
Sure.
And so like that and he never seems to have the capital, or never seems to want to move off the capital for a veteran player.
Yes.
Which I think is another part of the equation as well.
So yeah, like I think that is a move that people have taken issue with. Talk about edge for the past 4 years. They've been trying to find somebody to pair with Hutchinson. That's been like 1 year stopgap here, 1 year stopgap there. Last year they had Muhammad, who popped, but clearly they didn't like him enough to give him the money that he earned. And then they had Davenport for a couple of years, and for as much as Muhammad excelled and had 11 sacks, Davenport was your starter when healthy. He played more. I don't like, if you want to take issue with Brad for not taking that position seriously, like I hear that. Like you want to take issue with maybe the 2024 class. I think that class is kind of, there's still a lot of time. These guys are entering year 3. But I think it's not looking as good as some of those other classes. Like I 100% like I'm in, and I think we have criticized.
And there were some heat checks in that draft too, like Giovanni Manu out of British Columbia, and again,
Vaki, who special team are like good on special teams.
Yeah,
but you're totally projecting him into a role he really never. He did play running back at Utah, but he like moonlighted at running back at Utah.
Yeah,
you're projecting him into that role in the NFL. Yeah, it was a side hustle. So like I think if you want to criticize him for those things, fine, and I think we have criticized him for those things. I will say some of the response to him lately, and to in particular this interview with the Lions Collective, I think it has swung a little bit too far, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah.
I counted, he's had 5 drafts here. In my brain, the way I see it, he's drafted like 11 Pro Bowl caliber players, about like maybe like 7 All-Pro caliber, and 2 guys that still a lot of time left are on track for the Hall of Fame in Panay and Saint. They're like 2 or 3 seasons. They're like 1 or 2 more All-Pro seasons away from dang near being locks, like for the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
He's drafted 2 Hall of Famers, 7 All-Pros. Like, I think he's established a very high baseline floor. And if you take issue with him and his like sustained success model of drafting and developing, fine. But I do think people sometimes mishear when he says, because he said it in the Lions Collective interview about like wanting to have sustained success. And I saw some of the response was like, sustained success, you've made 1 playoff run in the past 5 years. You've made the playoffs twice in 23 and 24. You've made 1 run in 23, and then you got knocked out in the first game you played in 24. Like, what success are you sustaining? Like, what, you're not a dynasty. But I don't think this is me now interpreting what Brad said. I don't think when Brad says we want sustained success, he's saying I want to win 5 Super Bowls in a row. Of course he does. But like, I don't think that's an unrealistic goal. You know what I mean? I think in his brain, the best way to win a Super Bowl is to get as many bites as the apple. So if you can be a Super Bowl contender for 3 or 4 seasons versus the Super Bowl favorite in 1, he views it, and I agree with him, but my opinion doesn't really matter in this situation. He views it as you'll take the 3 or 4 Super Bowl contending years instead of just the 1 bite at the apple, because football's a 60-minute sport that can anything can happen. The 9-8, the 9-7 Giants beat the undefeated Patriots in 2007. Like the Rams were the best team in football for like 4 months of this year, and then the Seahawks got hot and knocked them off. So I'm rambling at this point, but I just think some of the thank you. I think some of the criticism has gone too far, but that's not to say that he's above criticism. Like I agree. I think the past 2 drafts have not been to his standard, and that's a problem. And that's why they went 9-8 last year, because the 24 and 25 drafts did not contribute like the drafts from 21 to 23 did. And I think we're going to get into it in a little bit. They have gotten worse in free agency, at least in my opinion. He's going to need a draft in 26 like he had in 21, 22, and 23 if they're going to get back into Super Bowl contention. And first of all, make the playoffs again, but get back into to potentially winning a Super Bowl.
Well, and I think like we're pretty much in lockstep, but I also think like I am of the belief that like, hey, I fall somewhere in the middle between 1 shot in 4 years versus 4 shots in 4 years. 4 smaller bites versus 1 big bite. I fall somewhere in the middle of that because I do think that there is some level of criticism to be had of he doesn't go for it, and I think at a certain point, like you do have to go for it. Like you owe it to the guys, but also, what does that look like? I don't really know, and so. On the other hand, I think he's catching a lot of criticism, and I've seen this. This is a favorite of the 97-1 talking points is Brad Holmes is a scout. He's not a GM, and that is just absolutely preposterous. I don't remember if I said this last week. Most of the signings that he's made have outperformed their contract value. Something that we were talking about the Red Wings earlier. Something that drives me absolutely insane about that team and watching the way it's constructed is every free agent and player that they bring in from the outside who's a veteran does not live up to the value of their contract. I think the exact opposite can be said for Brad Holmes. You look at like guys who have come, outside of maybe Cam Sutton in like late stage year 2 DJ Reader where, he's just probably getting a little tired. I feel like you can really look at all of his free agent signings, and for the most part, 80% of them have either met or outperformed the expectations. And when I look at this year's crop of signings, it says, okay, they have a plan, and you might not like the plan, but I look at all of these players that they've acquired, and I said, you know what? That's a really intriguing player for that price. And I think ESPN put out a thing that was like they ranked the best off seasons so far, and they put the Lions third or something like that.
Yeah, it was Solak. Ben Solak.
And for that exact reason is like you look at these players and it's like, yeah, it's not really inspiring that they signed 4 players for a grand total of $5.4 million, but like these players got that either guys who are needed a change of scenery or they've had injury problems or something like that, and I think his like low tier swings have been pretty strong. And then his higher priced acquisitions have generally been fine too. I'm probably missing something off the top of my head, but like he went out and got Carlton Davis for a 3rd round pick. Carlton Davis was excellent for them in that season. He goes out and he signs DJ Reed. DJ Reed had a very no good back half of the season last year, but he was a stud before he hurt his hamstring. And I think a lot of the second half struggles can be attributed to that hamstring injury. But I don't know. I feel like most of the signings that he's made have been like Amik Robertson. He brings him in. Again, I've been one of Amik Robertson's like biggest critics time and time again. But for what like you thought he was going to be coming in, which is like a backup corner, maybe behind Ennis Rakestraw, to go to all of a sudden like he's a good starting nickelback and can maybe fill in an outside corner. I think he like outperformed that side. Like and so I feel like he's being unfairly maligned as in terms of that conversation as well as like he's a scout, he's not a G and that to me is just nonsense.
And then the last thing for me on this topic, and then we'll move on. I promise. I'm sorry for getting sidetracked, but to drive home my point earlier of him like not being above reproach, I do take not exception. I don't take it as a personal slight. I do take issue with kind of how they've addressed tackle, like at this point in the offseason, like letting Taylor go, replacing him with Larry Borum, who started 11 games last year, who I guess like is kind of can be a starter. Like the numbers bear out that, like, yeah, maybe in a bigger role he could be a starter. But giving him $5 million when a guy like Rasheed Walker got 4 or a little bit more, like Braden Smith from the Colts signed with the Texans for 10, or like Jermaine Illuminor, who I think is like has become a really good tackle, he got 13, so that's $8 million more than Borum got. But in my opinion, I think that tackle's position is so important that I wouldn't have put a $5 million Band-Aid on it, in my opinion. So like
It's an expensive Band-Aid.
Yeah, I think that is so far a mistake because in my brain, a little bit, even if you go into the draft thinking you can get one, it kind of telegraphs to the rest of the league and teams picking 18 through 32 that if they want to tackle and the lines are coming up, jump to go get the tackle.
Yeah.
So I do take issue with that. That's just one example. But to your point of the whole offseason, yes, I do think that they have brought in guys who I think could become the next Roy Lopez or Meek Robertson or Rock Ya-Sin. I know Rock is back, but Rock Ya-Sin or guys that signed 1-year deals originally and they exceeded expectations, or 2 years in Meek's case. But
yeah, I agree with you on the tackle stuff, and I'm actually like less convinced than ever that they are like for sure going to draft a tackle. And again, it's just he said everything that he said about the situation are things I expected him to say about the situation. But Justin Rogers, our former colleague at the Detroit News, asked him, like, just to clarify, because people are unsure, you view Larry Borum as a starting caliber tackle? And he says, oh yeah, he started 11 games last year. It's like, well, that's not really the question. And I guess it kind of is. I don't know. But like that part, if I were a Lions fan, it would make me a little nervous. I think that's the one area where they've kind of like really set themselves up to like be a disaster. And I'm not saying that it's going to be a disaster, but they've set themselves up for the possibility of it being a disaster.
Especially coming off a season that you did last year where the offensive line was such an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. But, maybe just having a guy who will practice.
Sure. Yeah.
Will help things out. Like there's a lot of variables at play here, but I tend to agree with you, and I don't really love what they've done at the tackle position because, part of me assumes that a lot of his talk is just like poker face, smoke and mirrors type of stuff. But I really don't think that they feel all that compelled to take a tackle at 17. Like I think it'd be cool, but like, and again, he also brought up on the podcast, like, what if I draft a tackle and he stinks? And it's like, well, probably get criticized for that, which is fair, but I don't know. I think they're, I don't know.
And listen, the pass protection numbers on Borum, like they do, like I think he allowed like 15 pressures and like 11 starts or something last year. Like he played pretty dang well. Like granted, the Dolphins offense with McDaniel last year was like Mr. like get the ball out quick with their quarterbacks. So that's some of it. So could it work? Yes. Do I feel good about it? I don't feel confident.
Well, the last thing I'll say about that before we move on to Muhammad real quick. I like if Larry Borum does start and exceed expectations, I don't know that Brad Holmes is going to get credit for that. Like, and so that's the interesting thing about where this fan base is currently at is like, I think if Larry Borum starts 15 games next year and has like a pretty good season, I think it'd be like, yeah, but Brad got lucky, and if that's the case, I think you could say he's gotten lucky quite a bit when it comes to a lot of these veteran personnel moves. So,
yes.
Again, it's March. We'll have to see how it all plays out. They could draft 2 tackles in the draft. They could sign a tackle.
They could draft 9 tackles.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens there. Real quick on kind of just wrapping up this financial constraints portion of the thing. Talked about losing Al-Quadin Muhammad, basically saying, they only had room for the one multi-year deal. And then once they gave that to Cade Mays and pretty much took him out of all the edge rusher discussions, at least like, I don't know what tier you consider that, like tier 3, maybe tackles, which is kind of the range that we thought that they were looking at, the Boy Maffes of the world, somebody I really liked for them. But he said, once we made that decision for the offensive line, made that commitment, it kind of took us out of some of those other options at edge rusher, including Muhammad. I'm a huge fan of Muhammad. I was so happy what he did last year. ... We just weren't able to make it happen. So, and he got paid like 3 times what DJ Wanham did. And I like DJ Wanham, and then I'll save this part for later in the show. We talk about whether they get better or worse. But.
So when Will Birchfield from 97.1, who was on the Lions Collective, he asked Brad about the Al-Quadin Muhammad DJ Wanham swap, and he said, what went into essentially picking Wanham over Muhammad? Because when the contracts got reported, both of them were reported as 1-year deals worth up to $6 million. And Brad kind of pushed back on the idea of it being like the same amount of money. And to, I think, add a little like context to that. So Wanham's cap number for this year is just under $3 million. Let's just round up and call it $3 million. Al-Quadin's is 5.3 if we're rounding up the same. So that's a $2.3 million difference. Now, I think a lot of both of their contracts is incentive based. And because Muhammad is coming off an 11-sack season, let's say that the Bucs gave him a contract and it says you get an extra $1 million if you get 10 sacks this year. That is considered an incentive that is likely to be earned because he accomplished it last year, which means that $1 million counts against the cap this year. If he hits it, nothing happens. It just continues to count against the cap that year. If he does not hit it, then the Bucs get reimbursed for that $1 million the next year as part of the rollover. And the same thing is for Wanham. Wanham had 3 sacks I think last year. So if there's an incentive in his contract that says an extra $1 million if you get 10, that'll be considered unlikely to be earned, so it does not count against the Lions this year. If he doesn't hit 10 sacks, then nothing happens. If he does hit 10 sacks, then the Lions will get $1 million hit on their cap for 27 because it became earned. So the Muhammad's 5.3 number and Wanham's 3 million flat number doesn't tell the whole story, but Muhammad did get paid more, at least for this year, from what we can see. The incentives and contracts don't get reported. They're not available on Over the Cap or any of these cap websites. But in terms of this year, yes, Muhammad is counting against the cap almost double what Wanham is making.
Yeah. Back to that 2023 class real quick. Basically said there's no real timeline for when we want to get these extensions done. Was also asked about the Achilles injury for Branch and whether that plays into hey, you're a little bit nervous. Do you want to see it first? And he was basically saying, there's been a lot of medical advancements where 10 years ago, a guy might not, if a guy had an Achilles injury, you would be able to tell just by watching him. He said, today that's kind of changed a little bit. Obviously, again, we'll see how true that actually is when we see Branch on the field, but kind of sounds like for the most part they're not really concerned about injuries for either Branch or Laporta, who had a back last year. So I would expect the Lions to operate as if they are trying to sign those guys. And I don't know, from their standpoint, I feel like if you believe that they're going to be healthy, probably makes sense to do it sooner rather than later. But on the other hand, I just don't. I think Branch makes me the most nervous, just because of the nature of the injury, and you already put a lot of non-guaranteed money into that position, and I think you could probably get out of it relatively easily, like we mentioned earlier. But I don't know. It's just a lot of money to commit to 2 safeties who have a ton of injury problems. And I don't foresee Brian Branch getting as much non-guaranteed money as Kirby Joseph did. So
yeah, I agree. I think maybe you could be a little bit more optimistic with Laporta's, but again, it's a back. So it's a back. But yeah, as long as it's not like a fusion, surgery that has to fix it, like Levi went through right early in his career. I think the Lions signed somebody else this year that had to have fusion surgery on their back. I don't remember.
Was it Wanham?
No, maybe. No, it was Damone Clark, the linebacker.
Oh,
when he was coming out of LSU, he had to get fusion surgery. I think those are scary. I think he slipped the disc and had to get it repaired. But again, it is a back injury, and he's an athletic, physical guy. So personally, I would like to see it from both of them if I was in Brad's shoes before giving an extension. But we'll have to wait and see.
And then real quickly, he also touched on the reported, I guess you could call it, tension between him and Dan Campbell. Mike Valeni from 97 won the ticket, saying last week that somebody who covers the team told him that this is the first offseason where there have been definite differences of opinion on roster construction. And he was asked about that. Basically said like the intensity, like when you have a season that's 9-8, the intensity around the building is going to tick up a little bit. But he also said, quote, when you have a disappointment of the season like we had, it's more intense in terms of it is deeper, harder look from top to bottom on everything. And that's what me and Dan have done in joint alignment, basically saying they're as in lockstep as they've ever been. So yeah, there's that.
I'm not surprised at what he said. If he had said that there is an issue, I think it would have been surprising. But the fact that he said there isn't, that's what I anticipated him saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And like, I don't know, Dan Campbell was very at the end of season press conference and at the combine press conference, like he was very like, we were too, we rested on our laurels, like we didn't, whatever. So I don't know. I'm curious to keep digging on that and see, what we hear, but sure. nothing too concrete on that front from us. So yeah. All right. Let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor.
For 44 years, Varsity Ford in Ann Arbor has been more than just a dealership. We're a family, proudly serving yours. As one of the top volume Ford dealers in the world, we're proof that when you treat people right, they come back, generation after generation. And now we make it easier than ever with complimentary pickup and delivery for both sales and service. So you can buy or service your Ford without leaving home. Varsity Ford, driven by family, built on tradition.
All right, segment 2 here at the Gridiron Gang podcast. Check us out on Twitter. I'm at Nolan Bianchi. He's at Rich_Silva. And do us a favor. Please rate, review the podcast, however you can contribute to the to liking, rating, reviewing the podcast. We would really appreciate it. It helps us grow. We're going to go position by position here down the Lions roster. Look at the transactions that they've made through the first wave of free agency. About first 2 weeks of free agency, I feel like can be considered the first wave. So we're just going to kind of go through. Rich actually wrote up a full story to DetroitNews.com, so go check that out. But we're going to start with the quarterback. In, Teddy Bridgewater. Out, Kyle Allen. Pending, CJ Beathard.
I think
really is not the equation at all.
Yeah. I think let's both say whether improved, regressed, or a push, and then we could talk about it. In my opinion, I say push.
Mm-hmm.
What
completely agree. Completely agree, but only because we haven't really seen these guys on the field.
They've started each of them have started 2 games since 2022. Yeah, Kyle Allen had a good preseason last year after the Hall of Fame game, including, like we've mentioned previously on this podcast, 2 games in which he had a perfect passer rating. But it was in the preseason, and for as much as you can be like encouraged by that, I'm also encouraged by like the presence that Teddy has. Like everybody loves Teddy. Every single person that has ever had an interaction with Teddy loves Teddy. If the Lions have brought him back for the 3rd time, they clearly see him as like a valuable piece next to Jared Goff, like in preparation and whatnot. I think they have a good relationship. His relationship with J-Mo is well documented. So for much as you want to be confident about Kyle Allen's preseason last year, I'm also the same confidence in Teddy Bridgewater for all the reasons I just said. So that's why I'm calling it a push. Also, it's backup quarterback. I think if either of these guys had to play an extended period, it's kind of over anyway.
Yeah. What's that famous quote from the Colts coach? If 16 goes down, we're effed and we don't practice effed. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So I
back to that, but real quick on Teddy Bridgewater, because you mentioned that thing with J-Mo. He's like that with everybody. Like he is everybody's big brother in that room. And I think is like I really do think that, like, generally speaking, a locker room presence is really kind of overrated, but I think this is an example of it, like, being aptly rated.
I agree. Like he's not obviously he's not going to be like a team captain because he's not a starter. But like in terms of like if you were to award captains for only off the field things, I think he'd be like number 1 on the list. Everyone loves him. He's like you said, everyone's big brother.
Yeah. Running back, we've got in Isaiah Pacheco, out David Montgomery. I'm going to say, obviously, they got a little bit worse at this position, but with the caveat that I don't really know if it matters all that much, just based on the trend of how much they were using Jahmyr Gibbs and what he might be able to do in a revamped offensive line.
I think very clearly it's a regression, but how could you not? Like, I think David Montgomery is a top, whatever you want to say, 20, 22 running back in the NFL. Like, you weren't going to find a guy better than that this offseason.
That's a good number, top 22.
I don't know. Like, it
very specific.
Just eyeballing it, like I'm measuring sugar or something. But no, like you weren't gonna find a guy better than that this offseason. And Pacheco, personally, I am concerned about the past 2 years, the injury stuff. Like, I hope he's not slowed down from those injuries. Like, I hope now that he has a full offseason, fresh place, new ideas behind potentially, in theory, a better offensive line than what Kansas City has become lately, he can get back to the year 1 and year 2 production. But I am also concerned that it has been a couple years since that happened. But at the $1.8 million cap hit that they got him at, I think it's fine value.
And to be a pass protector is,
yes.
I think a big part of that as well. So,
so
they might have even gotten better in pass protection to some degree.
Sure. I think they got worse, but of course they did. There wasn't really an avenue for them to get better in this position.
Right. Wide receiver. I think we're going to have a difference of opinion on this. Maybe not, though, because you like Greg Dortch. In, Greg Dortch. Out, Khalif Raymond. Pending, none. I'm going to say that Greg Dortch and Khalif Raymond are probably two similar caliber players. And I will say that I think Khalif Raymond is another example of a locker room presence not being overrated, because I do think that he set the standard for guys help set the standard along with guys like St. Brown. And I think a lot of people in that receiver room really looked up to him. And I also think that there is something to this idea that this guy who is scrapped his entire life, he's 31, he's working harder than everybody else still. I do think that matters a little bit. However, I do think his play has regressed. And I think you got a very similar type of player with a very, maybe not super similar backstory, but I think two guys who both think that they
chip on the shoulder,
came from nothing and chip on their shoulder and all this stuff. Greg Dortch told us a story last week about how he was thinking about going to the CFL, he just couldn't make it, and then ends up getting the tryout with the Cardinals, and the rest is history. I think it's kind of similar in some regards. So I don't know. You're losing the personality of Khalif Raymond, who by all accounts, including ours, is just a world-class human being. But on the field, I think there's an argument to be made that they got slightly better and younger.
So I think from a pure talent perspective, which is how I did the grades here, I think it's a slight decrease. I think Khalif Raymond, both in the immediate and long-term past in the NFL, has been more productive, albeit slightly, than Greg Dortch. But I will say from a value perspective, I think they got better, because Khalif's cap hit this upcoming year is 3.5 about, and Dortch's is 1.2. So you're saving, was that $2.4 million? I think the difference between these players is less or more, whatever. It's good value. That $2.4 million that you're saving, I think is good. So from that standpoint, I think it was a savvy move swap. But from a pure talent standpoint, I would still lean Khalif, in my opinion.
I just can't say that with confidence. I think a lot of it was based in opportunity.
He's a multi-time All-Pro as a punt returner, and and averaged 250 yards as a receiver.
Sure, but I don't think he was not that player last year. So why are we projecting him to be that same player in 2026? A lot of my opinion is projection.
I think as a receiver, he was largely the same player, and then as a punt returner, twofold. One, they asked him to catch everything, and then secondly, with the worst team, the worse team you are, I think the harder it is to be a good punt returner, because field positioning, if Khalif is catching a ball on the 8, it's a lot harder to return a ball from the 8 than it is the 30. You know what I mean? The worse defense you have, the worse it sets up your punt returner to have success. But I think the difference is marginal, and from a value standpoint, I do think it was a savvy move.
If you're going by pass production, I'm on your side. If you're projecting 2026 for 32-year-old Khalif Raymond versus 27-year-old Greg Dortch, I still think there's a chance to get better.
And absolutely. Dortch had a career best average of 11.6 yards on punt returns last year. So the Dan Campbell gif with the whole arm thing, he is trending up. Absolutely. So yeah, I hear that.
Tight end. In, Tyler Conklin. Out, nobody. Pending, Shane Zylstra, Anthony Ferkser, Giovanni Ricci. If you just take out the most recent season for Tyler Conklin, I think they objectively got like way better at this position. And I don't really think there's much debate about that.
100%.
They didn't lose anything. They just got a player. So
right. And like you said, there's the 3 guys that are pending. But even I think those 3 guys, I wrote it in the story. Let me see if I could find it. So since 2021, Tyler Conklin has 2,300 receiving yards. In that same stretch, tight ends in Detroit, not named Sam Laporta or T.J. Hawkinson, so the non-starters in Detroit have combined for 1,012 yards, so 1,200 yards less or 1,300 yards less. And of course, that's because Conklin was in a starting role for a lot of those years. But that guy who was in a starting role and who produced all those yards is now in a backup role in Detroit. So I think, yes, very, very clear upgrade to me. I think he could challenge for tight end too. Like, we'll have to see. Like, I
completely agree.
They really value what Brock Wright brings as, like, I think, like, acumen, just like knowing his responsibilities as a blocker, things like that. But I mean, shoot, man, I think Tyler Conklin can push for that tight end 2 job behind Laporta just as much as Brock Wright can.
Offensive line. In, Cade Mays, Larry Borum, Juice Scruggs, Ben Barch, new addition today. Out, Taylor Decker, Graham Glasgow, Dan Skipper. Pending, Jamarco Jones, Chris Hubbard, Coyote Awashika, and Tristan Colon. I think they got better. I don't really know, though. I think it's kind of a wash. Like, I think it's hard to evaluate just because we have no idea what they're going to get from their tackle position next year. Again, I'm going to call him a downgrade from Taylor Decker, but I think they got kind of marginally better at center. So I don't know.
I'm going to call it a push for now. And it's kind of just like a +1, -1 situation where I think Mays is better than Glasgow, but I am less confident in Borum than I was Decker. So for that reason, it's just kind of a push for me, pending on, and all of this is pending the draft. Like, of course, like I did say that in the story. Like, this isn't meant to be like a final grading. It's just meant to like identify maybe where like they have invested resources and where they still need to invest resources in the back half of free agency here and the draft. But for now, I'm going to call it a push with the opportunity to get better should they draft a first-round tackle.
Which is interesting because I think the thing that we're going to find here going through all of this is that they didn't get significantly worse anywhere, really.
Or significantly better.
But a good draft class can, I think, make them clearly got better this offseason. So
agreed.
We'll see how that goes. Edge, in DJ Wanham and Peyton Turner. Peyton Turner was another late week addition last week. And then out, Al-Quadin Muhammad, Tyrus Wheat, and Josh Paschal. Pending, presumably out, Marcus Davenport. I think you could make the argument that this is a push, and I'm only saying that. People are probably going to lose their minds at that. I'm only saying that because I don't think that what Al-Quadin Muhammad did last year was replicatable, at least in terms of the like sheer raw production of 11 sacks. And so DJ Wanham has a better career resume than Al-Quadin Muhammad. And I think there's reason to believe, like, if you were betting one guy to have 10 sacks next year, DJ Wanham opposite of Hutch or Al-Quadin Muhammad, I think I'd probably take DJ Wanham. Is that crazy?
I don't know if I don't know if I would take that bet, but I agree with you that it is a push.
Well, you're risk averse.
Because yeah. I do agree with you that it is a push, or at the very least, maybe a slight decrease. But I'm gonna plant my flag and push, because I think Wanham, for all of the pass rush stuff that Muhammad did, like career high in pressures with 51 or 52 or whatever, 53 maybe, the 11 sacks that he had, for the highs that he had there, he did play kind of only as a pass rush specialist, whereas Wanham is a 3-down player. So I think you make up for what he might not get as a pass rusher. You make up for it with the run defense. And like I said, not complete grades. If they can couple Wanham with a pass rush specialist in the draft, basically a Muhammad replacement, I would feel pretty decent about the edge position next year.
Again, I not that he's TJ Watt, but I think people are dramatically underselling his pass rush ability because he does have a couple seasons with low totals. But in 2024, he was on pace to record an 8-sack season for the third time in his first 5 years. Like, that's pretty good.
Well, I think also part of the issue is that, like, I think he is very much like is what he is as a power rusher. Like, I think he's got his moves, you know what I mean, in his toolbox. Like, he's not a speed guy. Where Muhammad, I think, was like a little bit quicker, and we saw we all know the time to pressure stat from last year was really slow. Like,
and
so
we have begged them to get some more speed up the defensive line.
So I think that's where like some of the apprehension comes from, which I agree with, which is why I've said, like, through the draft or in the back half of free agency, you're like, get a guy that can win with speed to pair with Hutchinson on third downs. In my opinion, is the best way to do it. But without that guy here, I'm calling it a push to a small decline, perhaps.
Yeah. And to the point of Brad Holmes when he was talking on Lions Collective, like, Al-Quadin Muhammad was not a known commodity before he came here. Like, there's reason to believe that the guys that they bring in can, in some way, shape, or another, excel because they have had that happen. On the other hand, the defense has not been very good pretty much the entire time. So I don't know. It's a weird situation all around. Yeah. Tough to evaluate at times. But defensive tackle, in, nobody. Out, Roy Lopez. Pending, DJ Reader and Pat O'Connor. They got worse simply by nature of losing a player and not adding one. But I think neither of us really expected them to add a whole lot. I think we both thought it was a good idea to bring Roy Lopez back. Unfortunately for the Lions, he got a pretty nice raise, a 2-year deal, and he gets to go home, which is probably a little bit tough to compete with given their financial constraints. I don't really know that there's another big move coming. Like, obviously depth will be had, but I would assume they're pretty much done.
I mean, I could see them adding edge because they are getting Levi back, and Levi, in theory, can maybe kind of replace Roy. Not the same player, like, not the same skill sets, pretty much at all. But in terms of, like, just the third defensive tackle in that rotation, I would like to see them invest somewhere, like maybe like a mid-round pick in the draft, because I do think Roy Lopez was really good, and I understand why you couldn't give him the contract that he got from Arizona. And like you said, maybe even if they tried, like, he's like, I'm going home, bro. Like, it's you know what I mean? Like, that's where I'm from.
Yeah.
It's pretty sick that he was home, left for a year, balled out, and then just gets to come home and make more money now. Go ahead.
At his introductory press conference, like, his entire family was there. And so, like, I'm imagining that that's something very important to him as well. Like, it's rare that it's like, oh, it's my uncle over there. Like,
yeah. Usually it's just like maybe like the spouse and that's kind of the kid. The spouse and the kid is usually.
Well, if they're a rookie, their parents are there.
Yeah. I do. I mean, I was gonna say I do think they got worse. Duh, like you just said, they haven't added anybody. They did get worse in the spot. And I would like to see them add somebody here to pair with Levi that can replace Roy.
Linebacker in, Damone Clark out, Alex Anzalone, Grant Stewart, pending Zach Cunningham, Ezekiel Turner. I think they pretty clearly got worse at this position. Even if you are not the most Alex Anzalone defender out there, I will stand on the fact that he is one of the better coverage linebackers in the league. And that's hard to replace. But I also think Damone Clark is kind of interesting. So I'm not interesting enough to be like, he'll be able to be Alex or anything like that, especially because he's like got an outside chance to start. Like, I don't even think he has like an inside track at a starting position. So I think not much conversation warranted on this one.
No, yeah, and to kind of take a big picture look at the defense for a second. Edge, we talked about, kind of at best a wash. Defensive tackle, they got worse. Linebacker, they got worse. We'll get to cornerback and safety, but they didn't get definitively better in either of those spots. Like, I do think there is concern that, like you said, a defense that maybe in the entire 5 seasons that they've been here they had a 10-week stretch in 24 before everyone got hurt, and like a 7-week stretch this past year where it was like pretty good early in the season. So altogether, like 4 months out of the 5 years that they've been here, they've had a good defense. If you Frankenstein it and put it together, that unit that has for 75% of the time not held up their end of the bargain compared to what the offense has been doing, that defensive unit has seemingly gotten worse so far is concerning. I think at 100%, absolutely. That's the big picture on linebacker specifically. I think that's most interested. What I'm most interested in going forward is what the heck they're going to do here. Because if they want to stay in base, like if they don't want to change, if they want to do like their 3 linebacker stuff and do it as much as they've been doing it, you're either just going to keep you are keeping Jack Campbell at Mike. You're either going to keep Derek Barnes at Sam and then put Malcolm or Clark or someone like that in Alex Anzalone's position. And I think that's a tough ask to put one of those guys, particularly like Malcolm, let's say, because I think if you had to pick a guy right now, I think we would probably say Malcolm. You said Clark has an outside track. I think Malcolm probably has the inside track if they didn't add anybody else to fill in for Alex. I think asking Malcolm, who specializes a little bit more in defending the run, in doing the same things that Alex did, I think that's like an unfair ask and setting him up to not have success if you want him to play man coverage as much as you asked Alex. So I just don't know what they're going to do. Or they're going to move Barnes back there and then play more nickel, because now you're putting an extra DB on the field, which like I guess could work, because then you won't have to ask Barnes to play as much coverage as you asked Anzalone, because there'll be an extra DB on the field. So I guess that's something they could do, but we've kind of gotten no indication that they are going to make like a sweeping change to their defense. So I don't know. I just don't know what they do at the spot, and that's why I think losing Alex Anzalone was such a big deal. And if you want to pick one position where they got the worst at, and I think it's going to hurt them the most, it's linebacker to me.
I completely agree. What I will also say, and we might be getting ahead of ourselves here, but talking about, how are we going to fix that defense in general? Do not, this is my first big draft prediction. Can I put it on the board right now? Do not, it's not even really a prediction, but more, I'm just keeping an eye on it. A DB in the first 2 rounds, would not rule it out one bit. I know you and I talked about, had a little text argument about DB in the first round. Might be a little rich, but if you're telling me that it's like a safety who can change the dynamic of what you're able to do on defense, take him at 17. If he's like a special player, take him at 17.
Interesting. We've talked. We've had this discussion before about the value of those kinds of players. I value those players. I do.
I do too. But you have. It is objectively a fact that you have been able to find the best safety in each draft in the second round outside of the Kyle Hamilton season over the last 5 years.
Yeah. So no one should draft a safety in the first round, including.
I did not say that.
Anyway,
I did not say that. I'm saying it is an objective fact that you have traditionally been able to go get those guys.
I'm just being annoying to you. Yes, there are.
Also, you know what? We did our mock draft yesterday. We had.
Oh, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
Dylan Tiedemann at 10, and Toledo safety Emmanuel McNeil-Warren at 20 to the Cowboys. I was like, man,
Nolan had the even picks. Those are his picks, by the way.
Yeah, those are my picks. I'm like, you know what? Like maybe the Nicky Manwari, Seattle defense thing, that encourages teams to see the value in these guys. I think we also said that with Kyle Hamilton. So I feel like it's totally possible that we get to draft night. It's like, wow, Caleb Downs didn't go until 12 and then Tiedemann went 47,
Sure.
So we'll see what happens. But I'm not ruling out a DB in the first 2 rounds, and I don't think you should either. You be the people at home, not Richard Silva.
What do we got at cornerback?
In Roger McCreary, out Amik Robertson, pending Arthur Mullet and Keenan Garber. I think based on McCreary's past production, I think you could argue you got worse, but I think projecting potential, I'm open-minded.
I kind of view this similar to how I view running back, where you weren't going to pay $8 million a year for Amik. You just were not going to be able to afford that this offseason, evidenced by what Brad said yesterday with the whole, they signed Mays and then they kind of had to go into that tier 2 and 3 and what have you after that. So you weren't going to pay Amik that much amount of money. I think it's a good pivot to McCreary, on a cheap deal, that you're that you're paying, or the cap hit is less than $2 million. I do think he is a worse player than Amik, evidenced by the $7 million separating them that they got in free agency. So they did get worse, in my opinion. But I can totally see, like you said, like McCreary coming here on a 1-year deal, like other guys have come before him, and all of a sudden he's leaving or getting extended in Detroit. After 1 year in Detroit, his value is higher than what it was previously. I could totally see that happening. I think, just like I said, I think Pacheco is a good value. Dortch is a good value. That's probably a better similar. Instead of comparing it to running back, I want to compare it to receiver. I think slot corner and receiver, how they operated this offseason, I think good value at both of those spots.
Better value than they would have gotten signing the other guy for the same price.
Agreed.
7 times the value, Roger McCreary to Amik Robertson. So,
sure,
financially.
Absolutely. And also, I wrote about this about McCreary recently. I didn't realize coverage obviously is kind of at the forefront of what a cornerback is tasked to do. But a guy that plays in the slot as much as he does, and as much as Amik did, like run defense is a large part of that. In 3 of his 4 seasons, I think this past year is the exception when he got traded. He's been in the top 20 among cornerbacks for run stops, which is tackles that result in a failed play for the offense that they don't pick up 4 yards on first down or 5 yards on second down, whatever.
The inverse of success rate.
Yes, the opposite.
Or you make a stop on a play where the offense was not successful. I guess you already said
that. I think Pro Football Reference describes it as on first down, if the offense gains 4 or more yards, success. 3 or less, not success. So success for the defense. Mm-hmm. And then on second down, it's 50% of the yards to gain. And then on third or fourth down, it's all of the yards to gain. Did you get a first down or not? McCreary ranked in the top 20 for run stops in 3 of his 4 seasons, and he was tied for 6th in 23. So 3 seasons ago at this point. But with 13, he has 31 career run stops since entering the NFL. I think he is a plus run defender. TBD on what he does in coverage, but at least you're getting that.
Safety, we've got in Christian Izine Jr. out, Daniel Thomas, who got, I want to say paid, but got a nice little 2-year deal with the who did he sign with, Jacksonville?
Cleveland.
And then pending Avonte Maddox, Jalen Mills, and DeMonte Casey. I think they have probably gotten just for the special teams value that Daniel Thomas provided. I'd probably argue that he got a lot worse, and you're just swapping out reserve safeties here, your 4th safety. Mm-hmm. So I don't really know that defensively it matters a whole lot, but I also think given the injuries to Branch and Joseph, there's a chance that this guy's going to have to play. And I know that he's a guy we're both intrigued by just because he's somebody who kind of hit the ground running, has kind of grown every year as a player, but just ran out of opportunity due to a logjam in his position in Tampa Bay, coming here, extremely motivated, has good football on his resume, and I think could end up being one of their more interesting signings this offseason.
I do think there's also value in the fact that he can play safety and nickel, where I think Daniel Thomas was kind of safety exclusively. So maybe you make up for it a little bit there. We'll see what happens at that nickel spot. I think at this point, I'd probably put my money on either Ennis or McCreary, one of those 2 guys, and then that allows Izien to go be depth at safety where you have the injury question marks. But if Izien's your starting nickel corner week 1, I'm not going to be super surprised either.
Just to put a bow on this, I feel as though the Lions have gotten slightly worse, but they haven't gotten nearly as worse as people will make it seem. And I think a lot of the losses that they had, a lot of the departures they had were necessary because of age. And I think there's a chance that we're sitting here in a year looking at this list of players that we went through and saying, based on the play in 2026, they did get a lot better by adding these guys and subtracting these ones. So again, not that I'm saying it's for sure going to happen, but I think it's fairly possible. I think it's probably 50-50.
The pushback I'd have on that is I think the 2 spots that not the 2 spots. One of the spots that I'm most concerned about is tackle, which is one of the most important, I think, in the NFL. And then I really don't know what they're going to do. For a defense that struggled as much as it has, which we just went over, replacing Anzalone is going to be really hard. I don't know what the heck they're going to do there. Those 2 spots in particular is what I'm concerned about. And we'll see how much of an impact that has. And maybe those holes get filled in the draft.
Yeah. I'm not as worried about nickel or anything like that. And I think they got better at center. So
Yeah, like I'm not. I think they'll survive going from Amik to McCreary or Ennis or whoever. Or I think they'll survive from going from Muhammad to Wanham, or they'll survive from going from Khalif to Dortch, or all those other guys that we talked about, Allen to Bridgewater. But the linebacker one does concern me. It just really does.
I also want to say I understand why perhaps getting slightly worse with potential to have gotten slightly better is not acceptable for a fan base that just watched their team go 9-8, finish in last place, mix the playoffs at the hands of Max Brosmer knocking them out on Christmas Day. I totally get that. I also think they got a lot easier of a schedule this year. Like I think there's a lot of factors at play here that will ultimately result in the Lions being a better team than last year, or at least record wise, but maybe like there's not much difference between like the actual talent level.
Yeah, the Madden overall is still 91 in both teams or whatever.
Right. Yes, that's a great way to describe it. All right, let's run through our mock draft here real quick. We're just going to kind of hit on some trends that we kind of acted on or things that popped up during the podcast. We're going to tell you who we picked for the Lions, but we'd encourage you to go to DetroitNews.com, look through the mock draft, and see it for yourself there. So I just got a couple notes. We're going to start with Georgia offensive tackle Monroe Freeling. He's a guy who at the start of the draft cycle, it was like, man, his draft stock is probably second round, late first. And then all of a sudden it's like, man, he might be right in that perfect spot for the Lions to take him at 17. And now it has reached the point to where I have convinced myself that there's almost no chance that he'll be there for the Lions at 17. We had him going at 6. Second offensive tackle off the board behind Francis Maui-Noah from Miami. I felt like it might be a little aggressive, but at the same time, I am like, this is a draft where there's not a lot of like blue chip talent. And if you're betting on traits, Monroe Freeling has some pretty incredible traits.
And we had him going that 6 overall that's Cleveland, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yep.
Fill in the other tackle hole opposite of Titus Howard because they traded for him from Houston. A top 10, almost top 5 pick at this point. Maybe the hype train has gone overboard, but I don't know. I think he's pretty dang good. He's kind of like he didn't start a ton in college. I forget off the top of my head how many
18
starts. Thank you, 18 starts. But those 18 starts look pretty dang good. You know what I mean? So it's
like physically, he's a monster. And right, he's flexible as all get out.
So it's not even like, sometimes when you bet on a guy with physical tools, it's in spite of his poor play because it's like, well, if we get him, we can fix the poor play.
Yeah.
His issue is right. His issue, he had good play. His issue is he just didn't show it in 50 games like some other guys did.
Yeah.
But in the 18 games he did play, it looked pretty dang good.
Yeah. Miami defensive end Ruben Bain seems to be falling a little bit. We had him going 8. I've seen that kind of be a trend with him where he's falling down draft boards, and I actually saw some people commenting on that yesterday, some national draft writers. But Lance Zierlein was one of the people who kind of said like, hey, this is probably a result of like, not that he's falling, but I think people are starting to catch up to the chatter that was happening at the combine of where he was actually viewed. Again, who knows how much of that is smoke and mirrors. I would not be surprised at all if the New York Jets walked to the podium at 2 and said, we're drafting Ruben Bain, defensive end from Miami. However, it is kind of notable that he does seem to be falling a little bit in these mock drafts, in these big boards, and could potentially be within strike. Like, I don't think there's any way he gets to 17, but maybe could be in striking distance for a trade up at 13. I don't know.
It'd probably have to be more something like that, like right outside the top 10. They go up and get him. That's probably going to be difficult without a 3rd round pick.
Yeah, absolutely. Safety City. We just talked about this. We had 3 first round safeties, and I took 2 of them. Caleb Downs at 5 to the Giants, Dylan Tianneman at 10 to the Bengals, and Emmanuel McNeil-Warren to the Cowboys at 20. Again, I'm projecting the league, the copycat league, to look at what Seattle did with Nicky Manwari and say, oh, we got to get one of those guys, and then we can be an elite defense. What's interesting is that like these guys that we're talking about, like we have continually talked about this year over year of like, oh wow, that guy's really important. Oh man, he just went in the 2nd round. I feel like what you need to like solidify the trend is a Super Bowl, because now they've won the Super Bowl, then people will actually go like all out and copy it. Kind of like running backs. Like everybody was like, running backs aren't worth anything. Running backs aren't worth anything. And then the Eagles signed Saquon Barkley, and then they won the Super Bowl, and it was like, all right, running backs are cool again, you know? And so I think when we could see something similar with the safety position.
How you feel about safeties, and like you're like, you could just get that guy in the second round, is a little bit how I feel like running backs. But I think we both agree that like there of course are exceptions. Like yes, like if you can guarantee that a guy's going to be Nicky Manwari or Kyle Hamilton or whatever, you agree that like that's a top 10 pick. Like if you can guarantee that guy's going to have that impact, and I agree. If I can guarantee that a guy's going to be Jahmyr Gibbs or Bijan Robinson, like yes, like draft them high. But like I am a little bit averse to drafting like. For example, I had like the Saints, or not I had the Commanders, and I thought about Jeremiah Love, and I just thought back to like what happened with Gene T and the Raiders last year, and I was like, you got so many other holes. Like, don't even think about running back. I can't do that with this pick. But if you guaranteed me that he's Jahmyr Gibbs or Bijan Robinson, I'm in. But you know.
Also, we do not have the same opinions. I do not have the same opinion on safety as you have on running backs. I am not against drafting a safety in round 1. I am just pointing out that historically speaking, that guy has been available in round 2. And this conversation started with
saying.
Myles Garrett.
Anyway,
would you rather have Myles Garrett or try to find another Brian Branch? I'd rather have Myles Garrett.
No, that wasn't the conversation. Anyway, David, we had David Bailey at 12 to the Cowboys. Maybe a little bit low. I think that would be kind of. Good luck to anyone trying to replace Micah Parsons, but if you're going to try to replace Micah Parsons, I think you'd feel pretty good getting him at 12.
Yeah. For the Lions, we both gave them an offensive tackle. I don't think we could have gone in any other direction. But again, this is totally shaping up to be the class where Brad Holmes drafts an edge rusher. He's like, well, you guys want me to draft an edge rusher? Now, so we need a tackle. You don't want me to draft an edge rusher anymore? Totally see it happening. We both gave them a tackle. Again, we do this every year. Oh, Lions need a defensive end. They're going to take a defensive end in the first round. Not entirely convinced it's going to happen. I went Blake Miller. You went with Blake Miller from Clemson. You went with Caleb Lomu from Utah. We both wanted to draft Blake Miller based on how the board fell. But you were a gentleman and a scholar, and you said, you know what? You've already drafted Caleb Lomu in this draft and already done a write-up in one of your mock drafts on him. Let me take Caleb Lomu. Let me take that off your shoulders, King. And I appreciated that.
Thank you.
So tell us about Caleb.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yes, like you said, like I think if I could have picked either, I would have picked Miller. But in the interest of giving two perspectives, I think the benefits of Lomu is that one, he's been Utah's left tackle for the last 2 years. So if he is ready to roll, like from week 1, you can keep Panay at right, which I think. I'm not concerned about like Panay dropping off at right, or if you were to move him to left, but I do like if I'm 99% confident in him at left tackle, I'm 100% confident in him at right tackle. So if I don't have to move him, I won't. So if you know what I mean. So I think that's a plus. I don't know if he'll be ready to start week 1 because I think he could get like a little bit stronger as kind of the prevailing thought about him as a player, that maybe it'll take him just a little bit to get going. But over a career 808 snaps in pass protection, he allowed only two sacks. It was 8 pressures last year in 12 appearances. Pretty good run defender, or pretty good pass protector, and also what he does in the run game. So yeah, that's kind of the elevator pitch for Lomu.
Blake Miller is a guy who I think started lower on everybody's board, but he's starting to work his way up. I think the most appealing thing about him is he's got the NFL ready frame. Like a lot of these guys that we're talking about, they do need to, fix their frame, add some weight in one way or another. I do think that Blake Miller still needs to add some weight, or at least just find a way to like increase his strength and his anchor. He's 6'7", 317 pounds, 34.25-inch arms. His relative athletic score as of today is 9.9, very high. Elite vertical, elite speed. He ran a 5.04, I think, at the time. So spent all 4 years at Clemson, started 54 games. I think the one of the other things about him is that you would maybe like to see him be a little bit more crafty for a guy who has played that much football. But I think just like generally speaking, like baseline player is very intriguing.
I think he checks basically every box in terms of ready to go from jump if you want him to go from week one, with all the experience that he has. You talked about his height and his weight at 6'7", 317 pounds, 34.25-inch arms, fit more than checks that box. The athleticism, you mentioned the 504 40. He was in the vertical jump 32 inches, which was 18th out of 40 offensive linemen. So he has all that stuff. The toughness that he broke his wrist in like a bone in his wrist in spring practice between his sophomore and junior years. And not only did he come back and be ready for the season, he missed one spring practice that year between his sophomore and junior seasons. He just, had a huge wrap on his arm the rest of those sessions. I think to me, if anything can happen on draft night, but I think it's pretty clear at this point, like it's crystallizing a little bit. Tier 1 is Maui Noah, Fano, and Freeling, and Tier 2 is everybody else, whether that's Miller, Proctor, Ihanachor, Lomu. I think those are probably the Tier 2 guys. Of those guys, I think Blake Miller is my favorite.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and I maybe give him some competition with Lomu. I like Lomu a lot, but I think Miller is obviously a lot further along in his development. But that could also be a reason to draft Caleb Lomu,
Sure. I will say there's something to be said about Proctor as well, that he, I think, gives you more interior flexibility than any of these other guys do. Like, I think Proctor can survive at guard if you would like him to. Like, Borum comes into training camp and is just kicking butt. Like, and okay, he's your tackle now, and then Proctor versus Mahogany for left guard. I think that's the plus with him, but yeah.
I think that it's interesting because I think you could frame that as a positive or a negative. Because like we said about Blake Miller, I think one of the best things about him is that a lot of times, especially in the first round, there's all these like offensive tackles, and it's like, but maybe he's better suited to play guard. Like there is no questioning whether Blake Miller is better suited to play guard or tackle. He is an offensive tackle. He's the most offensive tackle looking guy who's ever offensive tackled. So,
sure.
Yeah. Which I think is kind of a plus for him.
Sure.
But, anyways, keep 4, cut 4.
Let's do it. So,
right.
Like I said.
Oh wait, last thing on the mock draft. We had Jeremiah Love going to the Vikings at 18 again. We recognize he should probably go earlier than that, but we have not allowed trades in the mock draft, and so he's just going to have to keep going at 18 in the Minnesota Vikings for the foreseeable future.
The Saints filled running back, the Chiefs filled running back, so that leaves possibly the Giants at 5, the Commanders at 7, the Cowboys at 12. So, like, unless one of those teams drafts him, he probably will slide. But if he does start sliding in real life, I'm assuming someone will come get him. But we just, like you said, we didn't do that. So
yeah. All right, keep 4, cut 4.
All right. So, like I said, I'm going to have you. This is draft related. I'm going to have you keep 4, cut 4 first round prospects of how you feel about them to the Lions at 17 overall. Now, these aren't just 1 through 8, the best prospects. Like I'm not like it's not
tough. You're putting me in a bind here.
Yeah,
Silva.
I will say that all of these guys have been floated. Like potentially the Lions could take them in the first round, whether maybe they got to go up to get them or anything like that. But all of these guys are potential Lions. I'll say. Your first name that I have for you on this list.
Okay.
Clemson edge TJ Parker.
Man, I don't like that you did this to me.
It's a tough
because I gave him to the Lions at 17 in my last mock draft.
Second to last at this point, right?
Second to last mock draft, yeah, before this one. I like TJ Parker. I think he's kind of like the ideal stylistic fit, opposite of Aiden Hutchinson that they probably look for. More of a run first, like heavy presence guy, heavy hands. I'll probably keep him just because I feel like it would be hypocritical to don't do that. This is the biggest day of these young men's lives.
What?
And I'm keeping him and you disagree. That's the biggest day of his life.
You could have said any word and I would have said, Tell
that to TJ Parker.
All right. Your second
name.
I
have to keep him as a matter of principle.
A lot of the same things you could say about Parker. Keldrick Falk from Auburn.
I'm gonna cut simply because I feel like you're gonna start feeding me some offensive tackles. I feel like I can't keep 2 edge rushers off the bat.
Man, happiest day of his life, and you're cutting him. Monroe Freeling.
Keep. 100% keep. I actually regret taking TJ Parker now because now I know that you're just going to give me a bunch of players that you know I like. And also the tough part of doing a mock draft, which I've talked about before, but especially like in the context of the way we do them for the Lions, it's like we only have one team that we really care about the pick, right? But there's all these players, and it's like, oh, are these players going to fall to them? Well, not if I'm doing it. Because I like them so much that I'm going to have them to go before the Lions pick. So I think I actually messed up putting TJ Parker as a matter of principle. Because I think that was a situation where I just gave all my good picks to the teams right ahead of the Lions. And because I didn't want to be like, oh, Penny falls miraculously. So anyways.
Blake Miller.
Monroe Freeling. Gonna have to keep Monroe or Blake Miller because I just drafted him in the mock draft 3.0, and I think we both agree that's
a lot of names left.
You're gonna give me like Arvel Reese, Ruben Bain,
Fernando Mendoza, Jeremiah Smith next year. Caden Proctor is your next name.
There was a second I was like, oh my gosh, who's Jeremiah Smith? Who's Jeremiah Smith?
The receiver from Ohio State.
Yeah. But I was thinking that he was like a first round prospect in this year's class, and I was like, oh no. Anyways.
Caden Proctor is your next guy.
Caden Proctor. I'm gonna cut him. He's probably one of my least favorite tackle prospects of the first round guys. And yeah.
All right.
Not much more needs to be said.
Max Ihanator.
Man, see, I feel like you're gonna give me some good ones on the back end here, so I'm gonna cut him, even though I do like him and I think he could definitely be in play for the Lions at 17.
Caleb Lomu.
Man, I can't wait for you to give me Caleb Downs as this last one. I'm gonna keep Caleb Lomu. What do you got?
Sonny. No, I'm just kidding. Akeem Mesidor.
Oh, perfect. Cut. I do not support the drafting of Akeem Mesidor.
Why?
Because you got to be younger than Rich Silva to enter the draft. That's what I always say.
But what if it's a positive that he's like pro ready? Like, who cares about 2029?
I do.
But I'm saying,
how do we know he's pro ready? How do we know he's not just a literal man amongst boys? If I went back to my high school,
but if you believe that he is pro ready, like who cares about his age? If you think he can replicate what he did and he just will have a 4-year career shorter than everybody else, I
doubt that he'll replicate what he did. I think his being 25 playing against 18-year-olds.
Well, it's not. 18-year-olds aren't starting in the modern college football anymore. Everyone's kind of 21 plus.
20?
Unless you're Jeremiah Smith.
I don't buy it.
So you keep TJ Parker, Monroe Freeling, and Blake Miller, and Caleb Lomu, and you cut Keldrick Falk, Caden Proctor, Max Ihanator, and Akeem Mesidor.
I'm not gonna lie. I think I went 8 for 8. For me personally,
I kind of agree. I think Freeling, Miller, and Lomu I would keep, and then I would have a conversation about
Falk against Parker
and Mesidor. I'd put in that discussion. The three of them. I think you can make an argument that if you want to order them 1, 2, 3, and vice versa.
Mesidor like doubled his career highs in sacks and pressures last season, and some of that is like due to him playing more snaps than ever before. That doesn't raise a red flag to you? Why couldn't he do that when he was 24? Or why can't he do that when he was 23? He did do that when he was 24. He doesn't turn 25 until
next month. I don't know. Pretty dang good though.
Just saying. All right, I'm pretty satisfied with that though. So it was a good one. Good
Heartless.
Keep 4, cut 4. All right, thank you for listening to today's episode of the Gridiron Gang podcast. Be sure to subscribe so next week when we record a new episode, you wake up on Thursday morning and it's sitting right in your Spotify player waiting for you on your morning commute. For Nolan Bianchi, Richard Silva, we'll talk to you next week. Same time, same place.